incest. Protesters fanned out in major cities across the state chanting, "My body, my choice," and vote them out. 2020 presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders held a rally in Birmingham.
Right now, all across the United States, there is a well-funded attack coordinated by right-wing extremists to deny women the right to control their own bodies and their own futures.
President Trump said on Twitter exceptions should be made in cases of rape and incest, but that the anti-abortion activists must stay united. The president, in an interview with Fox's Steve Hilton, explained why he regularly posts messages like these on social media.
I've destroyed bills that were going to be voted on that were bad, and I've gotten bills passed that were good by using Twitter. And Twitter is really a typewriter for me. It's really not Twitter. Twitter goes on television. If they have breaking news, I'll tweet. I'll say, watch this, boom.
The president on Fox's The Next Revolution with Steve Hilton. A former NFL player goes on trial Monday on rape charges. Kellen Winslow Jr. is accused of raping 2 women last year and in the 2003 rape of an unconscious 17-year-old girl. He faces prison time if convicted. Winslow pleaded not guilty. His lawyer says he looks forward to clearing his name. Winslow played for Cleveland, Tampa Bay, New England, and the New York Jets. He's also the son of a Hall of Fame tight end. 11 people were killed at a Brazilian bar by an armed mob. Officials call it a massacre. News media says as many as 7 gunmen were involved in the attack in Para, in the northern part of that country. This is Fox News.
Get a Coke 12-pack for only $3.49 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get a dozen extra-large eggs for only 49 cents when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get a case of Circle K water for only $2.99 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy.
We know too well the inconvenience of not having power after a storm. You worry about the food in the freezer going bad. Nights get hot. It's hard finding comfort when going to sleep. These are realities. But with solar and battery storage from Micronesia Renewable Energy, these realities can be a thing of the past. The solar works during the day and the batteries power your home at night. Call 632-2613 to see how solar plus battery storage can make life a little more convenient. MRE, the smarter choice.
The youngest candidate in the crowded Democratic field tells a New Hampshire town hall he has the experience to lead the country.
In a 1-hour Fox News town hall at a high school gym, South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, just 37 years old, answered questions about his age.
I would say being a mayor in a city of any size in America right now is about as relevant as it gets.
Abortion.
Who gets to draw the line? And I trust women to draw the line.
And if the country is ready to elect an openly gay, married president.
At the end of the day, it's worth trusting voters with that choice and that they will evaluate you for who you really are.
Buttigieg is propelled to the top tier of Democrats, promising to bridge geographical and generational divides. In Claremont, New Hampshire, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The South Texas church where a gunman killed more than 24 congregants is beginning a new chapter. Parishioners and survivors gathered at the new sanctuary in Sutherland Springs for its dedication a year and a half after the tragedy. The church commemorated the victims by reading their names as the church bell rang. A bird is to blame for shutting down a soccer field.
A tiny bird standing up to soccer players and soccer balls and winning. The killdeer bird deciding to take up residence in the middle of the Teaneck, New Jersey soccer field, laying her eggs there, and because it's protected by the American Migratory Bird Treaty Act, they can't evict and relocate her. So it's the soccer players who have had to decamp to another field. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
Billionaire tech investor Robert Smith delivered what may be considered the most generous commencement speech ever. He stunned the graduates at Morehouse College in Atlanta, announcing that he would pay off their student loans, estimated at up to $40 million. Smith is the founder and CEO of Vista Equity Partners, a private equity firm that invests in software, data, and technology-driven companies. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 Data2Go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is data to go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
Legends aren't born, they are made. And during our Jeep celebration event at Cars Plus and Mighty, you'll receive up to $6,000 in accessories with the purchase of a new Jeep Wrangler Motor Trend SUV of the Year. Customize your new Jeep to the way you want it. Or how about a new Jeep Grand Cherokee? Save up to $5,000. Or save up to $7,500 on a new Jeep Compass Sport. It's our Jeep celebration event going on now at Cars Plus and Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you. Accessory special cannot be combined with other offers. See dealer for details.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We start the program that way every day because it's important to keep track of our rights, our civil rights. Among them is the right to keep a firearm at your house for your personal protection. They're all important, and we think that it's important that we pay as much attention to any of them as we can, especially the one that seems to be somewhat endangered, which is the Second Amendment, the right to keep and possibly bear arms. There are attacks on that amendment from the left on a daily basis. There are also some complexities, one of which is of the current trend towards states attempting to do that which is illegal, which means to encourage the use of an illegal drug, a Schedule I drug known as cannabis or marijuana. And I've got an item here that comes again from Bearing Arms. That's that website by Tom Knighton. And if this were on the card, I would refer to it as marijuana versus guns. And it goes like this. Medical marijuana patient fights to restore gun rights. Now, I hope he's not fighting with his gun. Medical marijuana is legal in several states. People can obtain it and use it and not worry about the cops busting down their door. Now, I think, Real Joe Cruz, that means that people can enjoy marijuana and or cannabis in the privacy of their own homes as they're enjoying life.
Yes.
However, it's not necessary to enjoy marijuana or cannabis in the privacy of your own homes to enjoy life, correct?
Yes, it's not necessarily necessary.
It is possible, right?
Necessarily.
Yeah. Okay, now, people can obtain it and use it and not worry about the cops busting down their door. They're complying with local and state laws, after all. However, marijuana is still illegal at the federal level. This can create some complications. One Minnesota medical marijuana patient is trying to deal with one of those complications right now. In particular, he's trying to get, he's trying to get his right to keep and bear arms restored. Patrick McClellan was on the front lines in the fight to make medical cannabis legal in Minnesota. He was one of the first to be issued a medical card to use marijuana. He says it helps him live with a rare form of muscular dystrophy. McClellan is fighting mad. After years for fighting for marijuana to legalize medical cannabis, he was surprised to learn his efforts made it illegal for him to own a gun. He said, when I wanted to sign up for the class, the instructor told me that I could not take the class when I revealed I'm a medical cannabis patient. McClellan said, federal law prohibits any person who is an unlawful user of or addicted to any controlled substance from shipping, transporting, receiving, or possessing firearms or ammunition. Marijuana is listed as a controlled substance, as a Schedule I controlled substance, and there is no exception in federal law when used for medical purposes. Tom Knighton says, I'm sympathetic, but I also have to point out that the prohibition isn't anything new. It's been there for a while. And there's been a number of other cases where people had their Second Amendment rights taken when they took on the role of medical marijuana patient. However, the effort now appears to be something that would make a difference, and not just for McClellan, but for medical marijuana patients throughout the nation. They're hoping to get marijuana downgraded from a Schedule I controlled substance, which means it has no medical use, to a Schedule II. As a Schedule II, it would be technically legal. It would technically be legal to be prescribed at the federal level, even if individual states still ban it. That would mean patients in states that have legalized it would be able to maintain their Second Amendment rights. This solves a ton of issues for people in rabidly anti-gun states, who love to use this as a pretext for gun confiscation. It will rob those states of their pretext, which is enough reason alone to want to see this change made. Medical marijuana patients are obeying the laws of their communities, but are being denied their constitutionally protected rights. While few support the idea of drug addicts buying guns, the law designed to prevent this are also keeping law-abiding citizens, and they are, from exercising their right to keep and bear arms. That needs to change. I get the law, and I get the court rulings upholding governments acting against medical marijuana patients, but this is getting ridiculous. That's the Second Amendment for today. So, of course, I've been singing the same song since the beginning of time, or at least the beginning of Tall Tales. It's against the law. So, you can have states that put things on the books that make it legal, at least as far as state prosecutions are concerned, but that doesn't change the reality of the situation. And that's why I thought we made a mistake here when we were in such a big hurry to start a new industry, the cannabis industry. And once again, I complimented Clinton Ridgell on his understanding of marketing techniques. Clint didn't introduce his bill for recreational marijuana by saying this: hey, I've got this bill that will make it legal as far as territorial purposes are concerned for you guys to use this drug that's going to make you feel really good. He didn't say that. Clinton came along and said, I'm starting a new industry. Starting a new industry, jobs, exports, tourism, tax revenues. What is this new industry called? Clint, well, never mind. Don't pay any attention to the details. Just concentrate on the new industry part of it. But Clint, isn't marijuana against federal law? Yeah, I know, but it's industry, remember? Clint, isn't marijuana against federal law? And didn't you take an oath when you were sworn in as a senator that you would support the Constitution and laws of the United States? Well, yeah, but, I really don't like that law, so it's okay. So here we are, and we keep dredging up these things like, there's an immigration downside. I read Catherine Camacho's immigration column on that last week. There's a firearms downside, etc. But that's the way it goes. Okay, so that's the Second Amendment. From there, we go to the Daily News, as you were, to Zemi Iklatny. It's a portion of the program where we do the local edition of Meet the Press. We discuss the editorials of the two daily newspapers. I have my blue pencils here handy. I get on them for poor grammar. I get on them for bad English usage. And when it's all over, I may award the coveted Blue Star to the better of the two editorials. And if I catch either newspaper engaged in the P word, plagiarism, I've got my red pen right here, and I will award the horrific P to that editorial. Yeah. And I've had to do it a couple of times. Plagiarism right here on Tall Tales. So I'm going to start with the Daily News, but it's not going to take me long. The bad news is that they didn't write a local editorial. This editorial is about Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Donald Trump. You think it's favorable to Donald Trump or unfavorable to Donald Trump? What do you think, Real Joe Cruz?
I think it depends on who wrote it.
Yeah, well, it came from the Daily News. It came from Gannett.
Okay, then it's not favorable.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So the bad news is it's not a local editorial. And, of course, you don't have to read very far before you figure that out. The good news is that they did give credit to USA Today. They didn't try to pass it off as a locally developed editorial. So no plagiarism today. But if I wanted to read columns that bash Donald Trump, and I do, I spend a fair amount of my time reading things that are unfavorable to Donald Trump on a couple of the websites that I visit, some of the emails that I get, just so that I can discuss such things with at least a minimum of intelligence. But I don't need to go to the editorial page of the Pacific Daily News to find something that was generated in Washington that's bashing Donald Trump. Not necessary at all. So that's not how you get blue stars, Daily News. Then I turn to the Post, and once again, the Post is talking trash. I think this is the second editorial in a row where the Post is talking trash. Here's how it goes. Dumping trash on someone's property is shameless. The environmental and safety hazards for the area's school children aside, the mindset that it's okay to dump trash on someone else's land should become part of our community discussions. Some of us may get tired of seeing images of illegal dumping of trash on Guam. We may not like seeing these images, but we have to continue to care about this issue. If you haven't participated in a cleanup, we hope you can find the time and bring the adolescents and teens in your immediate or extended family. If they're old enough to do household chores, this will be a good start of their life lesson. Just make sure to bring safety gloves and masks. You should bring masks. Now, I can understand this because if you've got adolescents and teens and they're out there picking up trash, they don't want to be recognized by their friends. It'd be bad enough probably to be out there with their parents. That's embarrassing enough. But to be out beside the road picking up trash with your parents, God, how would a teenager ever live that one down? So I can see why they need to have masks, just so that their friends wouldn't recognize them. Rash guards or similar clothing would be useful. I wonder what a rash guard is. Do you know, Real Joe Cruz?
It's close to the body worn spandex type material.
Really?
People wear swimming.
A rash
like
guard.
Yeah, they call it a rash guard, but it's like a long sleeve garment that you wear swimming.
When I read this when I was preparing for my show, I put my emphasis on the wrong syllable, and I read it rash guard.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, rash guards would be useful. So I guess you got a couple of guards, like the fellows that patrol your property. You got those that are calm and cool and collected. Some are kind of rash.
Yeah.
So when you're out there wearing the mask, trying to hide from your friends, you want to make sure you have a rash guard out there in case somebody tries to hassle you, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Almost every weekend, a few dozen of our island residents take a few hours of their personal time to pick up trash that others have dumped on the side of less traveled roads or in the boonies. In one such cleanup in Jigo last Saturday, part of the goal was to help children retake the school bus stop that a homeless man had decided to turn into his own personal shelter. The weekend volunteers' goal was to remove the junk of rusty metal, decaying food garbage, old tires that had plenty of mosquitoes breeding in them, beer cans, styrofoam food containers, plastic beverage bottles, and old electronics strewn along a long stretch of road to and from the bus stop at Chalon Ramirez. Wow, that must have been quite a sight. Some of the more obvious problems with this type of illegal dumping are the eyesore and the safety risk for school children who could trip over the broken glass or rusty metal, or to avoid the trash would have to walk on the asphalt road and face the danger of being hit by a vehicle. The safety of our drinking water is an issue too. This area in Jigo sits above a part of the underground drinking water source. As the rusty metal and discarded electronics disintegrate, they could end up seeping into the ground. The type of trash that ended up along this stretch of road tells about a story about certain members of our community who found the time to load the bag trash and other bulky junk in a vehicle and then had the wherewithal to drive to the front of part of someone else's property along a stretch of road to discard the trash. The environmental and safety hazards for the area school children aside, the mindset that it's okay to dump trash on someone else's land should become a part of our community discussions. What type of community have we become that some of us think it's okay to dump trash on someone else's road when the trash could have been driven to a transfer station for a small cost? This behavior is not okay, and we need to be more vigilant about this type of shameless act. I guess as long as we're talking trash, I got to mention something that I see as I'm out walking alongside our roads, which I do an awful lot of. My motto, Real Joe Cruz, is I get out and walk for, like maybe an hour and a half every day, sometimes longer. My motto is that it's better to wear out than to rust out. So I stick with that as much as I can. And wherever you walk on the road, you find cigarette butts all over the place. So I guess when you buy a pack of cigarettes, you have a license to roll down your window and just flip your cigarette butt wherever you want to throw it, huh? Yeah, it's a nice custom.
Syntax is supposed to take care of that, sir.
Is it really?
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, it's supposed to have people out there with dive bombers picking up the cigarette butts.
Yeah.
Okay, so today this is not, was not a real stem winder of an editorial. However, since there was once again no competition, I'm going to give the coveted blue star to the post. And I go from there to the card. But before I get into the card, I think I'd better kind of set the scene, talk a little bit about one of the subjects on the card, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my producer here, and then finally, you know, Real Joe Cruz, I don't like to talk about myself, but this one is about me, so I have to, right? Okay, so today's limericks from Andrew. Here's the first one. He who sits on a border commission must keep in mind his duties and mission. So square up your jaw, follow the law, and don't ask the court for permission. Good call, Andrew. Right on the money. Now, I know you don't like to talk about yourself, Andrew. Andrew, Real Joe Cruz. I know you don't like to talk, and this time you're not going to get a chance.
Nice.
I will, okay? Here we go. The Real Joe Cruz often is merry, but he should take heed and be wary. A personality cult could have a result that's tragic and awful and scary. Real Joe Cruz, vid sap. Okay, and then finally, a talk show host needn't be tall to deal with the news, big and small. But it helps if he's witty, decisive and gritty. A salty dog there for us all. Yeah. So that kind of sets the tone for today's card. So, of course, I got to start out with CCU wackos versus the law. And today we have an news article in the Daily News. CCU denies request for information on meeting that approved raises. The Consolidated Commission on Utilities denied the Pacific Daily News request. I wonder if they got a hold of mine and just copied it and put their name on it. The Pacific Daily News request for public records and recordings of its November 27 meeting, during which pay raises and bonuses for managers were illegally discussed, then later approved. The information could be released, however, based on guidance requested from the courts, said Commission Chairman Joseph Duenas. The elected commission, which sets policy for the Power Authority and Water Authority, on May 10 voted to rescind the raises and bonuses after Attorney General Levin Camacho said they were illegally discussed during a closed executive session, contrary to the open government law. Attorney Vincent Leon Guerrero, who was hired by the commission to provide legal guidance on the matter, told commissioners he agrees that discussing salaries during a closed meeting was illegal and that the employees must return the extra money. He also told commissioners Guam law does not allow employees to receive bonuses. Leon Guerrero was hired because two of the employees who receive raises are the staff attorneys for the power and water agencies who happen to be in the illegal meeting. And they got raises. The newspaper requested minutes, recordings. This newspaper requested minutes, recordings, and public records from that closed meeting, but Commission Chairman Joseph Duenas on Friday stated the executive session involved employee evaluations, which cannot be made public. You wouldn't ever want the public to know what kind of a job people that get large bonuses are doing. You know, why would people even care about such silly things? Yeah, good call, Joey. It's clear that the discussion of salary adjustments, etc., during closed meetings was improper. Because of this, all salary adjustments and bonuses were rescinded, Duenas wrote. Given that evaluations are considered part of the personnel file, now I'm going to read those last two words again, personnel file. It is the CCU's position that the recordings and minutes are not subject to disclosure. Now, let's just stop for a second and think in terms of personnel files. Do you have a personnel file, Real Joe Cruz?
That's confidential, sir. I might.
Maybe.
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. But you refuse to admit the existence or non-existence of a personnel
I can
file.
confirm nor deny, sir.
Well, let me ask you this. If you had one, would you carry it around with you all the time?
Of course not.
Would you bring it into the show?
For you, yes, sir.
Well, you're on your game today, Real Joe Cruz. Where would you expect that your personnel file would be kept? And once again, here's a hint. File.
In the filing cabinet.
In the filing cabinet, yeah. So could you conjure up this mental image? The Consolidated Commission on Utilities is in an open session. The chairman says, now we're going to go into executive session.
Nice.
And a couple of burly guys wheel some filing cabinets into that executive session. Can you kind of picture that in your mind?
I see it.
Yeah. And they're in there for a while, and then they come out, and then they go back on the record and say, I move to adopt the raises we discussed inside. And, of course, everybody that's still there is thinking, they must have looked inside those filing cabinets in order to make the decision on those raises, right?
Yeah.
That had to have been. Otherwise, why would they go to the trouble of bringing those big, heavy filing cabinets into that meeting? That's got to be it.
You're right, sir.
Yeah.
Give us a minute or suffer the consequences.
Absolutely. Okay, well, there's Dave Brubeck's Take 5, so take a minute here, and then I'll come back to CCU wackos versus the law.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
Ready to buy real estate on Guam? Congratulations! But what now? There are so many questions, so many things to do. Where do you start? The best place to start is to call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty, Guam's biggest name in real estate. They aren't the best because they're the biggest. They're the biggest because they're the best. Trust the name. Find out why. Call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty today. 888-2121. Trust the best.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so Joey would have us believe that they can go into executive session and evaluate the performance of employees and then come back into open session and assign raises, and that the performance evaluations is not a part of the salary increase or decrease or whatever program, that they're two completely separate subjects. The article goes on to say it is the CCU's position that the recordings and minutes are not subject to disclosure. This is done for the protection of the employee's privacy interests. Now, let's stop and think what privacy interests employees might have. Now, I see people who work for the waterworks and work for the power authority from time to time, and I don't think that the two utilities are doing a very good job of protecting the privacy interests of those employees. because they drive around in trucks like the Power Authority. They drive around in these trucks that have GPA on the side. And Waterworks, they have this clever Waterworks logo on the side. Some of them are in uniform, and then they have these badges that say GPA or GWA. So if I see them doing that, it gives me the opportunity to kind of observe and see what it is that they're doing. Because I figure if they're dressed like that, wearing those badges, and they're in their vehicles, they must be on duty. So I make my own evaluation when I see them. Now, if they were in camouflage vehicles, unmarked vehicles, and they could dress, like the rest of us, they could wear, shorts and put a hat on backwards. That's a pretty good disguise, right? Real Cruz, put a hat on backwards and do some of these other things. Then people might not realize that they work for the Power and Water Authority. Therefore, if they happen to be sitting in the truck vaping and enjoying themselves in the privacy of their own truck, I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't be able to give them a bad evaluation. So I don't think that CCU is protecting the privacy that work for the CCU. Like if you go up to their headquarters, you would know who works for the CCU just by walking around in there. And once again, you'd be able to make your own evaluation. So if an evaluation of an employee affects the employee's privacy interests, we've got to do a much better job of protecting the privacy of the employees. Maybe we should go back to that item that I read on the card about, if you're out picking up trash alongside, if you're a teenager picking up trash alongside the road, you should have a rash guard, right, Real Joe Cruz? And you should wear a mask. Otherwise, your friends are going to recognize you out there, and they're going to say, "Hey, I saw you on Saturday picking up trash. Boy, LOL. That was so funny. And you're with your mom and dad. Ha ha." So maybe we should give folks who work for the two utilities masks to protect their privacy. So we wouldn't want people to know that they work for the two utilities. We wouldn't be protecting their privacy if we did that. Yeah, that's really important. So that's what Joey said. That's what the article says. This is done for the protection of the employee's privacy interests, in contrast to the public's right to know. Now, why would the public have the right to know about what people who work for the Power and Water Authorities, why would the public have a right to know anything at all about what they're doing during working hours? I don't think we should have any right to know whatsoever. If the employee, maybe the employees don't feel like working hard or something, that's not our business. And if it were, then the privacy of the employee is much more important than the public's right to know. Forget about the public's right to know. The next part of the article, Duane has said the CCU has asked the courts for guidance. Now, I don't recall a meeting of the CCU where a properly noticed open meeting of the CCU where a motion was adopted to, quote, ask the courts for guidance. I followed this thing pretty closely. I haven't seen that. Did they do it in executive session to protect the employee's privacy? Maybe so. Asked the courts for guidance on whether it would be proper to release the information from the executive session, and has filed a writ of mandamus. Now, once again, the parliamentary aspects of that escaped me also. I don't recall that motion ever being made in a properly called and noticed open meeting of the CCU. Of course, those are kind of hard to come by. If you could do it, no sense doing it in an open meeting if you could do it in executive session. The information requested will not be released until the CCU receives further guidance or unless the court releases the information, Duenas said. And here we go again. I got to repeat this. He who sits on a border commission must keep in mind his duties and mission. So square up your jaw, follow the law, and don't ask the court for permission. Now, of course, this article left out the key word from Joey Duenas' thought process. Do you remember what the key word in Joey's thought process is, Real Joe Cruz? It starts with a C. Does that help you at all?
Being comfortable?
Comfort. Yeah. He just wasn't comfortable with releasing that information. So once again now, work on this mental image. Joey Duenas in a nice big lazy boy, right? You know, with a table beside it and maybe a pitcher of lemonade in the pitcher on the table beside the lazy boy, as a couple of burly linemen wheel in the filing cabinet so they can discuss raises. Joey's comfort level is high. We're protecting the employee's privacy, and no one's going to find out about any of this stuff. So that's the story. Now, on Friday, you may recall that I sent in my own FOIA on May the 12th, asking for the minutes, the electronic recording, and any other papers related to the executive session. That would be things like an agenda, the napkins that the members use to wipe their mouths after they drank coffee, whatever, any papers involved at all. And I got a letter back over this time I got a letter over the signature of Joseph T. Duenas. Unlike the letter that responded to Kevin Kerrigan's FOIA, this one was not signed by a secretary who apparently didn't make this decision. And it goes like this. In your May 12 FOIA request, you asked for the minutes, recording, and all other public records of the November 27 executive session. During the executive session, salary and compensation adjustments of certain GPA and GWA employees and adjustments were based on employee evaluations. So that's an admission now. So I had been kind of stumbling along, figuring that they did these evaluations and then did a brain dump and forgot all about the evaluations and then set the salary levels based on the intros of a pig, flipping coins, drawing straws, a bingo card, playing solitaire, something like that. But here Joey is actually admitting that the adjustments were based on employee evaluations. It is clear that the discussion of salary adjustments, etc., during closed meeting was improper. Because of this, all salary adjustments and bonuses were rescinded. 5 GCA Section 10108C exempts the disclosure of, quote, personnel, medical, or similar files, the disclosure of which would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. And what would an unwarranted invasion be, I wonder? Something like mentioning where one of the board members went to high school. You know, if you are what we used to refer to as a male, I don't know what we call them anymore, and you grew up on Guam and you didn't go to Father D, that could be an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. Because of this, I'm sorry, let me go on to the next part. The issue then is whether personnel evaluations are considered personnel files subject to non-disclosure. So could the minutes of a meeting be considered a personnel file? I think that takes a pretty vivid imagination. to think that that minutes of a meeting could constitute a personnel file. But that's the peg upon which Joey's hanging his hat. And then he's got case law to support his provision. In a case called Copley Press versus Board of Education for School District number 150, a similar question was discussed in the Illinois Appellate Division. Now, let me just stop there. So after all this time, they dug around and they found a case from Illinois that Joey's going to use to support what they did on November 27 last year. Do you think they had that case in hand at the time? Do you think that Bernadette Lou Sablon had that case in hand at the time she denied Kevin's public FOIA request? No. So it goes right back to one of the things that I think needs to be drummed upon all the time, and that is that the CCU screwed up, and they screwed up royally. And Joey's trying to save face with this evaluation thing, and they've set the lawyer out to comb the bushes to find some kind of support for a ridiculous theory. And this is the best that they could come up with. In my mind, as a ratepayer, as a taxpayer, and perhaps most importantly, as the host of Tall Tales, I think the question that the members of the commissioners asked is, in a sense, just as important as the answer they got. We all know that the policy of our law favors transparency and disclosure. And everybody who ever runs for any kind of public office, including the CCU, is going to tell you, oh, yeah, I'm all for transparency and public and disclosure. And, yeah, that's my middle name is transparency. In fact, Joseph T. Duenas, I suppose he'd tell you that the T stands for transparency. So if that's the case, then wouldn't this be the right question to ask when those FOIAs came in, if there were the slightest doubt? And in my analysis, there isn't the slightest doubt. But if there were, wouldn't the right question to ask counsel be this? Can we release those papers? Can you find a way for us to disclose those papers? What is the downside risk of our releasing those papers? Wouldn't that be the way to go about it? Instead of, I don't want to release anything. Joey said, what did he say? I don't care. I'm not going to release anything. I'm not comfortable with it. So, laying that foundation and then implicitly suggesting to the lawyer, go out and find some excuse so that we don't have to pony up the documents and the recording, all in the name of public service. The day will come when Joey is given a bragging forum and he can say, oh, I dedicated so many years of my life to public service. This is not public service, Joey. This is Joey Duenas service. You're trying to cover your own doggone. Can I say that on here? Yeah. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to save face. And look at how much time you've wasted doing it and how much money you've wasted hiring lawyers to answer questions that shouldn't have been asked in the first place. So this Copley case that they advance, that Joey advances as the reason that he can't disclose the minutes and the other stuff, is a case dealing with the termination of a superintendent of schools named Royster. Royster got fired. Now, is there a difference between someone getting fired and someone getting a raise? Those aren't exactly similar undertakings, are there? So when Royster got fired, Copley Press, which publishes newspapers, asked for papers that were in Copley's personnel file. A letter and 2 evaluations. And the lower court said, yeah, you can have them. And the exceptions in the personnel, medical, or similar files language in their law don't count. Otherwise, any board or commission could conceal anything just by sticking it in the personnel file. Okay, short break here, and I'll be right back. We'll take this up to halftime.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for the new Sweet and Smoky Steak and Guac Signature Wrap. How would you like it?
I'll take my ex-girlfriend, just checking in.
Aw.
Hey, David, it's me. Just checking in. I'm doing great. Just got the new Sweet and Smoky Steak and Guac Signature Wrap from Subway. Creamy guacamole, smoky sweet with Hio mesquite sauce, and double the tender steak. They just know what I want before I do. So, yeah, things are going pretty great for me. Subway, make it what you want. Limited time only at participating restaurants. Double meat based on average 6-inch sub. Okay, bye.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
So there's a case that came up in California about a school superintendent that was fired. And the trial court said, yeah, Copley gets to have those papers, and you can't evade the open government law just by sticking stuff in a personnel file. The an intermediate court of appeals, I'm sorry, this is Illinois, yeah. The Intermediate Court of Appeals reversed and said, yeah, it's okay. Copley was never that decision was never followed by any other court. And as I say, it didn't deal with minutes. It didn't deal with recordings. It dealt with papers in a personnel file, and it dealt with a termination, somebody getting fired. Well, I suppose if we're talking about sensitivity of information that arises in the workplace, getting fired from your job perhaps arises to the highest level of sensitivity. Getting a raise while you're on the job wouldn't seem to be very sensitive at all. Since everybody that was in that session, everyone that was discussed in that session, as far as we know, got raises, then I would suspect that if we looked at the minutes, we'd hear things like, yeah, so-and-so did a good job, let's give them a raise. Now, this really is an unwarranted invasion into someone's privacy, isn't it? To say that that person, that they did a good job. That would really be bad. But when in the case of Royster getting fired at school district number 110, as you were 130, what is it, 150? You know, perhaps that evaluation contains things that are defamatory, probably privileged, since in the context that they arose. So I could see that there might be a degree of sensitivity and privacy interest there that does not even come close when you're talking about people being evaluated for raises. And then, of course, in our case, people are asking for the minutes of a meeting, of an illegal meeting, and they're asking for a recording of an illegal meeting. Nobody's asking for anything from anybody's personnel file. But that's the best they can do. Lawyers would say that the case they cite is inapposite. to the facts and the law of the controversy that we're discussing right now. A layperson would say, man, they're really grasping at straws, aren't they? They don't have anything at all, and this is the best they can do. The other case that they cite, let me go to the next page here. Given that evaluations are considered part of the personnel file, this is what the CCU is saying. It is the CCU's position that the recordings and minutes are not subject to disclosure. So, and then they go on to say, this is done for the protection of the employee's privacy interests in contrast to the public's right to know. And they say, see U.S. Department of State versus Ray, a 1991 Supreme Court case. U.S. versus Ray dealt with asylum applications for people from Haiti. That's pretty close to what we're dealing with here, right? Yeah. So there's a degree of desperation here in the stuff that they're putting in this denial, trying to justify the unjustifiable. And then, of course, I suspect that they're dealing with people that don't carefully read some of the stuff that they put out. But take a listen to this. It is the CCU's position that the recordings and minutes are not subject to disclosure. Now, I don't recall the CCU in a properly called and noticed open public meeting adopting any position on this at all. I think Joey Duenas has, applying the comfort test to it. Chairman Joey Duenas said that the request would have to be denied based on his comfort level. On a scale of 1 to 10, Joey's down around a 2 level. And unless he can get it up around 8, he's not releasing anything at all. Then we go on. Please be advised that the CCU was preparing to file a declaratory action to ask the court for guidance in whether it would be proper to release the information in the executive session. The CCU want to follow the law. I wonder who the joke writer up there at CCU is. That guy should be, writing should be writing for some of these late night comedy shows. The CCU want to follow the law. An action for a writ of mandamus has been filed, which may provide the needed guidance. Is that their writ of mandamus? That's what it appears in the Daily News. It is for this reason that the CCU declines to release the recordings and minutes of the executive session until they are either released by the court or the CCU has provided direction with regard to the content of the disclosure. More direction than what I've provided? Well, here's a surprise. I'm going to provide some more guidance tonight. And it's a whole lot more persuasive than the stuff you got in front of you, Joey. Now, this last paragraph, it is this reason that the CCU declines to release the recordings and minutes until they either released by the court or the CCU is provided with direction regards to... What if 3 members of the CCU vote to release it? Would you do it then, Joey, or would you dig your heels in and say, no, we're not releasing nothing? Okay, let's break for halftime. We're halfway through the first Tall Tales of this week.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM,
and 104.3 HD3.
Tensions build in the Middle East. I'm Richard Jordan, Fox News. President Trump warned Iran that it will face destruction if it wants a fight after a rocket hit near the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad Sunday. Iranian officials say their country isn't looking for war. Saudi Arabia also says it does not want war, but insists it will not hesitate to defend itself against Iran. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff on CBS's Face the Nation says the rising tension is predictable.
All of these policy decisions have led us to a state where confrontation is far more likely, and that cannot be ignored. When you take a series of steps that, yes, ratchet up tensions, you shouldn't be surprised when the intelligence tells you, hey, tensions have been ratcheted up.
Tensions between the U.S. and Iran stem from the president's decision to withdraw from the nuclear agreement over a year ago. Protests across Alabama against a new ban which makes performing an abortion a felony unless necessary for the mother's health. The law provides no exception for rape and incest. 2020 presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders told a crowd in Birmingham the law will cost women their lives.
It is not an exaggeration to say that banning legal, medically assisted abortion and forcing women back into the arms of quacks will quite literally kill women.
Several states are trying to mount new legal challenges to the 1973 Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion. President Trump says he supports the rape and incest exemptions, but encouraged anti-abortion supporters to remain united. A South Carolina father reportedly shot and killed his own daughter after mistaking her for an intruder. The 23-year-old woman was shot through a door and died at the home. Gas prices dropped slightly to an average of $2.93.
Gasoline prices were rising for 16 weeks straight, but now in these past 2 weeks, the price is down.
Analyst Trilby Lundberg. This is Fox News.
So what's the deal? Are you still paying for the right to have your checking account at your bank? Well, at Bank Pacific, we think it's our privilege, not our right. That's why we offer My Green Free Checking, where your monthly maintenance checking fees are zero. That's zero. And it comes with a free Visa check card and monthly green e-statements. My Green Free Checking. Bank Pacific today. Because having you as our customer, that's our privilege.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender? FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
Legends aren't born, they are made. And during our Jeep celebration event at Cars Plus and Mighty, you'll receive up to $6,000 in accessories with the purchase of a new Jeep Wrangler, Motor Trend SUV of the Year. Customize your new Jeep to the way you want it. Or how about a new Jeep Grand Cherokee? Save up to $5,000. Or save up to $7,500 on a new Jeep Compass Sport. It's our Jeep celebration event going on now at Cars Plus and Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you. Accessory special cannot be combined with other offers. See dealer for details.
Severe weather and possibly tornadoes are expected for the Plains today. The area is already dealing with storm damage.
In and around Dallas, heavy rain and significant flooding as a line of storms moved west to east. All this after at least 11 confirmed tornadoes ripped across the southern plains, injuring a few people and decimating homes and businesses. All the confirmed tornadoes happened in Oklahoma and Texas, but at least 40 preliminary reports were recorded across Kansas and Nebraska as well. 2 separate storm supercells tracked for hundreds of miles. In McCook, Nebraska, trees and power lines were damaged, and a farm was also hit by high winds. And in Geronimo, Oklahoma, a confirmed EF2 tornado destroyed 2 homes and injured 1 person.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich. A 22-year-old woman collapsed while running a marathon and died. The recent college graduate was participating in Sunday's Rite Aid Cleveland Marathon when she fell about a quarter mile from the finish line. Her cause of death is not immediately known. The temperature was in the 80s, which is warmer than average. John Wick kicks the Avengers out of first place at the weekend box office.
3 weeks at the top, Avengers Endgame has been replaced at the top spot by Keanu Reeves and the 3rd installment of John Wick.
Jonathan, what have you done?
John Wick Chapter 3 has grossed an estimated $57 million in its opening weekend. Avengers Endgame slid to 2nd place in its 4th weekend with $29 million.
This is the fight of our lives.
This is gonna work, Steve.
I know it is. Because I don't know what I'm going to do if it doesn't.
Pokemon Detective Pikachu placed 3rd with over $24 million, and A Dog's Journey opened in 4th. Debbie Hanley, Fox News.
One of the stars of Avengers Endgame is off the market. Actress Scarlett Johansson and Saturday Night Live cast member Colin Jost are engaged. The couple has been together for 2 years. They recently walked the red carpet at the Avengers premiere. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
If you're driving, chances are you'll need gas soon. And by the growl in your tummy, a trip to the grocery store too. But don't just buy gas and groceries without getting double miles. Instead, apply for the new United credit card from First Hawaiian Bank and start earning double miles towards your next trip. Gas, groceries, getaway. With the new United credit card, apply at FHB.com. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC. Equal housing lender. Additional terms, conditions, and restrictions apply.
Okay, I think it's coming up soon.
Yeah, we're on Route 1 and near the airport intersection, right?
There, see it? What's the promo code? Look for the promo code.
Check out the Vantage Digital Billboard and reap the rewards. Catch the promo code on the screen and get $10 off your stroll ride by inputting the promo code on the Stroll Guam app.
Did you see it?
You got it. I got it. You just focus on driving.
Take advantage today and take a look at Vantage Advertising's digital billboard located on Route 1 at the airport intersection.
What a great show. You can't beat that big halftime show we have every day here at 1700 on Tall Tales. I know you all enjoyed it. Lady D, I hope you had your popcorn popper out today. And I suppose a few of you out there in our international radio listening audience even pop the top of an adult beverage in the privacy of your own homes as you enjoyed that halftime show. So here we are back for the second half of Tall Tales, and I'm going to start out the second half with something from the Supreme Court of the United States. You know, we're pretty much local oriented here, but from time to time I get involved with, or I try to bring forward issues from the national scene that I think are of interest to us here on the island. And I try to provide something a little different than the boilerplate that the left puts out in what is often referred to as the mainstream media. Today I have a case that is the results from a petition for certiorari to the Supreme Court called Callie Wood versus Evelyn Arnold and Shannon Morris. Now, when the Supreme Court takes cases, there's only one way that a case gets to the Supreme, well, not one way, but the way that most cases get to the Supreme Court is that a case could be filed in a U.S. district court, district court decision is appealed to a court of appeals, that decision is appealed to the Supreme Court. Actually, they're not appeals from the Court of Appeals. It's a petition for a writ of certiorari. In other words, saying, hey, Supreme Court, we've got something really interesting here that you might be interested in. And if 4 justices say, yeah, we want to deal with that, they will grant the petition and issue a writ of certiorari, which means bring those papers up here to us. And we're going to discuss it. Now, as a general principle, about 8,000 petitions for writs of certiorari are filed every year, and about 80 of them are granted. And that's how most of the cases get before the Supreme Court. Same thing when you're talking about a matter that has a constitutional dimension decided by a state Supreme Court. Petition for cert to the U.S. Supreme Court. Same deal. So in this case, Wood has filed for a petition for a writ of certiorari, to bring forward a case that was decided against Wood by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And before I get into this, I've got the decision, and I've got a news story that came out of a website called PJ Media. Before I get into it, I think I probably better say the obligatory, repeat the obligatory left politically correct mantras so that you don't accuse me of being totally politically incorrect, which of course is what I am. But anyhow, first of all, our strength is our diversity. And second, Islam is a religion of peace. And, that reminds me, of course, that when you talk about Islam, one needs to be very careful. Perhaps follow the lead established by Representative Ilhan Omar from the great and sovereign state of Minnesota, who at a meeting of CARE said that, she was having a tough time as a Muslim. And the reason was because on September 11, 2001, some people did something. Okay, we got a Joe now. Obviously, it's not you. We got a Joe on the line here. Could it be another Joe? I notice that Facebook traffic is super light today. Is our Facebook broken? Anybody out there in our international radio listening audience that's got access to Facebook, get on there and at least at least greet the real Joe Cruz so that I know you're out there. Anyhow, what can you tell me, Joe?
Mr. Senator Klitzkie, man, I think maybe this is a Monday. Everyone's just getting their horses going,
Okay.
Slow start. But I'm starting to wonder if any of your listeners are feeling the same way, that they're starting to have buyer's remorse in who they voted into this legislature, the Guam legislature. I was wondering if maybe you guys could take a poll or get a feedback on that. And thank you very much for letting me comment.
Okay, Joe, that's a good question. Joe wants to know if it's possible that any of the people that voted for the 15 folks at the legislature are now having buyer's remorse. In other words, they're saying, when I saw that used car on the lot, I thought, wow, I really got to have that car. And then they plunked down a pretty good-sized chunk of change and drove it home, and they got it home, and they found out that the oil hadn't been changed for 50,000 miles, and half the tires needed to be repaired, and the upholstery, on and on and on and on. And they're saying, it looked nice on the showroom, the floor at the used car lot, but I wish I hadn't bought this thing now. Are they having that same kind of buyer's remorse with the 15? It would seem to be almost impossible, real Joe Cruz, that there could be any buyer's remorse at all, because it seems that statistically we really succeeded. Because of 15 senators, 10 of them are female. And what could be better than that? 10 of the senators are female. Now, of course, nowadays, I don't know, at least they say they're female. But anyhow, Ken, what do you think? Do you think some people have buyer's remorse?
A lot of people have buyer's remorse. I mean, you just look at the comments on different things that get posted on Facebook, and the comments on shows like yours. It's becoming very apparent to many voters that a lot of the senators that are in there now are not representing the people. They've changed sides. They're representing well-established political elites or politically well-connected insiders. And I mean, just look at the legislation that's passing. They're passing legislation that's raising the cost of government, reducing the benefits for the people, and at the same time I know you and I don't agree on this one. They keep chopping away at the revenue stream while they're doing that, which leads to a future explosion of the debt bomb, in my opinion.
I think we agree on that one, Ken.
Okay, we agree that the math not only goes to Adelup to die, but math also went to the legislature to die, because we're in a situation here on our island where everything is deteriorating because the government doesn't have any money to maintain everything, but they keep adding more stuff that they can't maintain, and the stuff they should be spending money on, they're not spending money on. So I guess, yeah, there's a lot of buyer's remorse out there. And, just for the record, I think as far as I know, I've got the only writ of mandamus before the court regarding the CCU. I haven't seen the CCU file anything. In fact, they keep talking about how in tomorrow's meeting they will receive a letter from their conflict attorney that will advise them what steps to take next.
Well, that's a little bit scary too, isn't it?
Well, the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. Did I tell you that one before?
I don't think so, Ken. Go ahead.
Okay, looking at government in Guam and operations, a pessimist is a person that says things are terrible, they're awful, they can't possibly get any worse than they are right now. And an optimist says, oh, yes, they can.
Okay, looking on the bright side of everything, right, Ken?
Yeah, that's one way of looking at the bright side of everything. But what I'm concerned about with is, so much of the legislation that's coming out in the 35th right now is more geared for special interests than it is for the interest of the people. If we go back all the way to Bill 30, for example, that I've been railing against, let's see, it's public law now, but I don't remember which law it is, but that was the Guam Regional Medical Center Welfare Bill.
Right.
Here we have 45% of our population, 45,000 people covered by Medicaid or MIP. It's a finite pool. And public health only has so much money to do this. So the way things were before under Gilliam, people on MIP and Medicaid, they would use Guam Memorial Hospital because the difference in the rates allowed public health to provide medical coverage to so many more people. Because they had a finite pool, but the cost at Guam Regional was 3 times the cost of Guam Memorial. So if we sent people to Guam Regional, then we can only cover 1/3 of the people that need medical care. So I agreed with him on that. But now the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, is passed a bill to require government and Guam group insurance to specifically not accept any program that doesn't include Guam Regional, which is going to drive up the cost. Now, do you think the government is going to require the employees to pay the increased cost of this new plan?
No.
Or are they going to pass it on to taxpayers?
Of course, because the government of Guam employees are the favored folks on our island, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't see the government of Guam or the Department of Administration or even the legislature coming back to the government employees and saying, we created this bill to help Guam Regional out of their financial difficulties, and the only thing that you have to do is you have to either accept a cut in benefits so that we can keep the premiums that you pay the same, or you're going to have to increase the amount of the premium that comes out of your pocket in order to keep benefits at the same level. I don't see that happening.
And I don't either.
So, that's why I'm saying that you brought up the idea of buyer's remorse. We're only 5 months into the legislature, and there's already a half dozen bills that have been proposed that fly in the face of public opinion, like legalized casino bill, the Romeo and Juliet bill, and the Guam Regional Rescue Bill.
How about the Cannabis Industry Act?
Well, my own feeling on that is instead of throwing all the time and effort in that we did on that, we should have just waited until the federal takes the lead, since they're already in the process of taking the lead. And we could have taken that amount of legislative energy and focused it on reducing the cost of government, which they haven't done yet.
And avoid a lot of problems for people. You know what? People that get involved with the cannabis industry, every day I come up with some different kind of problem that the fact that cannabis is against federal law causes people that are going to sign up for any of those programs. So yeah, if we had exercised a little patience, but of course that the sense of urgency was there from the very beginning on Clint's Cannabis Industry Act.
Well, that goes back to the 2020 election campaign has already started. That's why we're seeing the types of legislation coming out that make great headlines. Chemically castrate sex offenders makes a great headline,
Yeah.
And it made a great headline for Brant McCready too, but it didn't work for him. I don't think that this type of attention-getting legislation is going to be as successful for senators for the 24th. For the run for the 36th legislature as it has been in the past. Because now with people looking at the actions of government employees more closely than we did before, because our middle class has been gutted and everybody's struggling. And now the more and more people are realizing that, hey, what happens in the legislature actually does have an impact on me. I better start paying more attention. Same thing at the utility level. I think the only reason why Joey changed his position from 3 weeks ago to, well, it's a minor problem, we'll have a meeting next month and we'll correct it, to a total reversal of pay raises, bonuses, and now a couple of the members talking openly about introducing a motion tomorrow, which remains to be seen because it's not tomorrow, to release the minutes and the audio. So,
little buyer's remorse there. And by the way, going back to chemical castration and buyer's remorse, Brant McCready is probably the poster child for buyer's remorse, because when he ran for re-election, he set the record. He finished dead last. He finished 30th. It's pretty hard for an incumbent to come in dead last.
Yeah, but in part of it, it was that type of legislation. I mean, he introduced a bill to borrow $425 million that didn't go anywhere. Then he introduced a bill for $156 million to borrow 156 that didn't go anywhere. Then he came up with the chemical castration bill that didn't go anywhere. So people were seeing that there was a big gap between legislative performance and the quality of their lives. I mean, this bill right here, when I did my research, when I testified against it before Brant McCready, I pointed out that here is a program that has a 50% to 98% failure rate. It has a 50 to 75% medical complication rate, and it's damned expensive. I mean, where's a guy in prison going to come up with $25,000 for the initial treatment and $1,000 a month for maintenance? So everything in there got repeated in Moylan's clarification bill. I don't know what you would call it. I mean, all he did is clarify who will get it. Well, it doesn't matter who is going to be authorized to get it if they can't pay for it, and neither can taxpayers.
True enough.
A campaign bill.
Yeah. True enough, Ken. Well, buyer's remorse. Talking about buyer's remorse, I think Clint's having a hearing on Thursday on the CCU concerning Freedom of Information Act. That should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I look forward to attending that, especially after the hearing tonight, and then I'll meet with my attorney to find out where we go from here, because they failed to meet the requirements of the Open Government Act. So I intend to enforce that, or I think the proper term is prosecute that.
You could use that term, yeah. Maybe the Attorney General would see his way clear to doing that too, since what they did was a misdemeanor.
Well, that's the only way that we get government officials to be more responsive to the public. We need to have more people standing up to government and holding government accountable for these types of behaviors and activities. Open government law is really for the benefit of the citizens, for the taxpayers, because I mean, over the years, there have been so many things that have happened in government that cost taxpayers millions of dollars. And I hate to beat the drum on GPA, but this is something I'm digging into now. We borrowed, I think, about $480 million to build those power plants in Cabras, right? We got a 30-year bond issued in 96 or 97, which was, a little over 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, we borrowed that money. The power plants blew up 4 years ago, the Cabras 3 and 4. They had a useful life left of 28 years. And so the documents provided in my first round of FOIA with GPA shows that the people of Guam have only been reimbursed $52 million on that $480 million investment. And $75 million went to renting generators.
Wow.
Well, the people of Guam are still paying these bonds through their utility payments. Where's the money?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
That's something I'm trying to get to the bottom to, because that difference of about $150 million in the book value of the units, 150 to 200 million in the book value of the units, that could have gone to a lot of things that would have benefited the taxpayers of Guam. We could have paid down some of our other utility bonds and reduced the interest and debt service payments that the taxpayers and ratepayers are paying. There are many things we could have done with $150 to $200 million that we haven't been able to, because we don't know where the money went.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're looking for it, Ken. I'm glad you're digging in on that one.
Okay, but anyway, I couldn't resist the opportunity to chime in on buyer's remorse, because since the legislators have already kicked off the 2020 campaign season, I think it's only fair that the citizens start looking at the 2020 campaign season as well. And the way senators get on the good side is they introduce legislation that benefits the people. Not every bill they're going to introduce is going to benefit the people. Some are technical bills, as you know. But when the majority of the legislation that's been introduced so far and passed is primarily for special interests, that's not a good start to the 2020 campaign season.
Right on, Ken.
All right. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to vent.
It's always good talking to you, Ken. Thank you. So on the subject of buyer's remorse, I'm just taking a peek at Facebook comments here. Ken Williams has got a good comment. He says, we need a lemon law. Most of the states have lemon laws. If you buy a car and you have a certain number of problems with it after you buy it in a short period of time, but the seller's got to take the car back and give you your money back. So maybe we need a lemon law for our senators. If any of them is listening, if they are listening, then they can start working on a lemon law right now. And then, I got one comment here, a few comments. You get comments like this, perhaps quality makes up for the lack of quantity. This is from R. Carl, and he says, "Howdy, Bob, Real Joel Cruz and Tall Tales Truth Posse. Even if you don't see my name on Facebook, I'm usually listening at home or while on the go. Sometimes I've sat in parking lots waiting for a break in the show to run in and get my business done. Tall Tales is talk radio crack." Yeah, well, good call, R. Carl. I think you're right on that one. And Pierre says probably the reason that the Triple J Rangers haven't chimed in is maybe today is a Government of Guam holiday. That's my kind of sarcasm there, Pierre. And Pierre also says, how about that front page article on the PDN about repeating sex offenders? It took them 7 weeks after Tall Tales brought it up, yet they missed the biggest part of the problem. Thank God for Tall Tales. Yeah, and our Carl would like to see that lemon law also. Okay, so I started out mouthing the obligatory politically correct comments here before I get into this piece that's not going to be really favorable about Islam. So I have said that Islam is a religion of peace and our strength is our diversity. So I guess I can go forward. And this comes from PJ Media, and the title of the article is "Christian Student Forced to Write Islamic Conversion Creed." And there's an appeal to the Supreme Court. During the 2014-15 school year, a Christian teenage girl was forced to recite the Islamic conversion code, the Shahada, in writing for her 11th grade class. She was also taught that, quote, most Muslims' faith is stronger than the average Christian. The Thomas More Law Center sued the school responsible, and the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled with the school. Thomas More appealed to the Supreme Court, filing a writ of certiorari on Monday, saying, under the guise of teaching history or social studies, the public schools across America are promoting the religion of Islam in ways that would never be tolerated for Christianity or any other religion. Thomas More President and Chief Counsel Richard Thompson said in a statement, I'm not aware of any school which has forced a Muslim student to write the Lord's Prayer or John 3:16. Many public schools have become a hotbed of Islamic propaganda, Thompson argued. Teaching Islam in schools has gone far beyond a basic history lesson, prompted by zealous Islamic activism and emboldened by confusing court decisions. Schools are now bending over backwards to promote Islam while at the same time denigrate Christianity. And yeah, okay, I'm going to come back to this after the seventh inning stretch, and then we'll go on to Bovacqua versus A Good Idea.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
It's a word that we've all had to deal with. It carries with it pain and uncertainty, embarrassment, and often depression. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about rejection and what to do about it.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Well, another seventh inning stretch. Here we are at the center field bleachers at Wrigley Field. We got 2 more innings to go for Tall Tales today. And I'm going to jump right back into this case involving the Christian student who was forced to write the Islamic conversion creed. According to the case filing, this little girl, or this 11th grade girl named Wood, was required to profess in writing the statement that, quote, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This statement is known as the Shahada, the Islamic conversion creed. A person recites this declaration in order to convert to Islam, and then prays and repeats it during the Muslim call to prayer. Wood said she sincerely believes that it is a sin to profess by word or writing that there is any God except the Christian God. Yet the school required her to write the Shahada and docked her points when she did not. So I won't go any farther into this, but it's a warning signal. You know, that in order to be attacked, there are ways of doing it without flying a couple of airplanes into the Twin Towers. And I think what we're seeing here is, the case that I just read, the attempt for some people to invade our educational system. And then, of course, we have Representative Tlaib and Representative Ilhan Omar that I mentioned a little earlier. And I've got a piece here about Tlaib, and this is what it says. Just when we think that Rashida Tlaib couldn't get any more anti-Semitic, she proves us wrong. Her latest remark is rather cringeworthy, too. During an interview with the Yahoo News podcast, quote, Skullduggery, she explained her take on the Holocaust. She said, there's a kind of calming feeling, I tell folks, when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust and the fact that it was my ancestors who lost their land and some lost their lives, their livelihood, their human dignity, their existence in many ways have been wiped out, and some people's passport. And just all of it was the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews post the Holocaust, post the tragedy, and the horrific persecution of Jews across the world. And I love the fact that it was my ancestors that provided that right in many ways, but they did it in a way that took their human dignity away, and it was forced on them. Republican leaders were quick to slam Tlaib's comments, and rightfully so. There's no justification for the twisted and disgusting comments made by Rashida just days after the annual Holocaust remembrance, when 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. There's nothing calming about that fact, said Steve Scalise. Going on down a little bit here, Lynn Cheney said, I'm honestly not sure what's more disgusting, the fact that Tlaib made these comments or the Democrats have to tiptoe around anti-Semitism instead of calling out and condemning those who threaten the Jewish people. Democrats claim to be the party that stands up on behalf of minorities. They claim to represent women and minorities, and yet here they are, allowing multiple members of Congress to continually say things that hurt a minority group, Jews. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to be watching the, I suppose it would be politically incorrect to use the word invasion when we're talking about Muslims. Probably works pretty well in Europe. But the issue of Sharia law, the Shahada, the Islamic penetration into the United States, and the desire to spread Islam through the public schools is something I'm going to be monitoring for you, and I will make occasional reports. Okay, from there I go on to Bavacqua versus a good idea. And I think we talked about that a little bit last week, where Bavacqua says it's a bad idea for Guam to have its own constitution. And I say it's a good idea for Guam to have its own constitution. And the reason that I say it's a good idea for Guam to have its own constitution, because if we were able to fashion our own local government in a manner that's most suitable for our purposes, I think things would run more smoothly. As it is, when we wanted to have an elected attorney general, we had to have literally an act of Congress. When we wanted to elect our school board, we had to have an act of Congress in order to do that. So if we want to change the structure of our local government, it takes an act of Congress. Now, if we had our own constitution, we could do all of those things ourselves. And Bavacqua wouldn't like that, because Bavacqua wants to convince you that we don't really have home rule here. Vocabulary gets really important when we're having these discussions, and there are those who would attempt to use vocabulary to confuse rather than to enlighten. The key words here are Chamorro self-determination. Chamorro self-determination, good. Home rule, bad. Self-government, bad. Chamorro self-determination, good. So the way we're set up right now, we have complete home rule except for two things. You know, we have our executive, legislative, and judicial branches encapsulated in the functional equivalent of our Constitution, which is the Organic Act, which we still have because we haven't enacted our own Constitution, which would replace the Organic Act. So we've got separation of powers, we have a representative government, we have a popular democracy, but we don't have our own Constitution. And the other element of home rule that we could have, that we've had the ability to do since 1986, is we could enact our own tax code. If we had our own Constitution and our own tax code, we'd have as much home rule, autonomy, and self-government as any of the states do. Yeah, now I can see you over there, and you're lazy boy there, Mr. Smart Money. I can see you and I can hear what you're saying coming back up the line from your loudspeaker up into my earphones here. You're saying, but we can't vote for president. Well, I said home rule and self-government. Are we governing ourselves here on the island of Guam to the same degree as people in a state in the United States do? You bet. Now, unfortunately, our national government gets into our business a whole lot more than it should. But all the members of our international radio listening audience know that I rant and rave about that all the time, how we went from a republic, a representative republic, to a national government populated by faceless bureaucrats who see the 50 states as just merely 50 administrative districts. So, you know, the fight is still there. Our fight is a little harder because we don't have voting representation in Congress, but it's the same vote that the states have. So we do have home rule. We do have local self-government. And a constitution and our own tax laws would be the last building blocks in building that particular structure. Bavacqua doesn't want that because, as he says in his column, he says in his column, part of the problem with passing a constitution under present circumstances is the federal government would no doubt require the Constitution to be consistent with federal laws and the United States Constitution. Would you want to live in a place where a constitution was not consistent with the United States Constitution, where life, liberty, and property were not protected by a due process of law requirement, where you weren't guaranteed equal protection of the laws. And this is what I always keep my eye on when I'm reading Bavacqua's stuff, because he goes at it in a very oblique fashion. But that's what he's saying. We won't have to do all of this stuff when we're independent. We won't have to do this equal protection stuff. We won't have to do this due process stuff. And I mentioned the other day about the Pieds-Noirs, the French, who had settled in Algeria 2, 3, 4 generations. And when Algeria became independent of France, the rush was on to the docks, people taking ships back to France because it wasn't safe to stay in Algeria anymore. Now, is it alarmist to think in terms of things like that? Well, exactly what are the plans of the Chamorro independence, folks, when we have an independent Guam for people that are not Chamorro? Well, they'll be okay. They'll be fine. You know, I mean, you read some of this stuff, and it doesn't give you much comfort. Back to, I'm looking out of the corner of my eye. No, we don't have a representative in the United States, and Mr. Smart Money knows that. We don't have a representative in the Senate. We don't have a representative in the House. But I've mentioned this before, and I'll go through it before. I'll go through it again. We do have a representative in Congress, and our representative in Congress has a house in the office in the Longworth building, just like every other congressman has, and he has a budget just like every other congressman has, and he has a staff like every other congressman, and he is a member of committees. Michael San Nicolas is a member of a pretty important committee, as a matter of fact, and can vote on committee and can use that committee vote as a means of log rolling. In other words, working with other members of the House, kind of a quid pro quo. I'll support your bill, but I hope you can support mine. That's what log rolling is all about. So we're in pretty good shape there. Robert Underwood has mentioned, I've heard him say this, that Congress, that when he was asked what a handicap it was for him to not have a vote in Congress, he said it wasn't that great because he says it's mostly relationships. Building relationships with other members is how you get stuff done. Now, how much representation in Congress does Oceanside, California have? They're about the same size as we are. They don't get to keep all their income tax money. They don't have a representative in the United States Congress. They don't get to keep the tax money paid in on Camp Pendleton, et cetera. So it's really easy to fall into the slogan trap. Well, yeah, but we can't vote for president. I'm going to take a peek at a couple of the other Facebook posts here, and then I'm going to go to our Carl. Here's one. De Gaulle on the integration of Muslims into society. Those who argue for integration have the brain of a hummingbird, even with all their college degrees. Try to mix oil and vinegar. Shake the bottle. Before long, they separate all over again. I'm guessing we'd have to create our own currency if we separate it. So he goes from one subject to another, or maybe I'm going from one post to another. Yeah, if Guam separated from the United States, perhaps we'd have the Guahan peso instead of the United States dollar, which would probably be worth a whole lot more than the United States dollar. Jesse Limtiaco says Palau didn't do that. I don't know what he's referring to. And then he says, sounds like conservative paranoia towards Islam. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. It's like I knew this guy who, had some well-founded fears, and he said, I wouldn't be so paranoid if there weren't so many people out to get me. So anyhow, let's see what our Carl has to say about these issues. Go ahead, Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Yeah, I'd just like to chime in about your comments about, your concerns about what would happen to, and I've heard these terms used very openly, outsiders, settlers. My father was one of those people. He's Caucasian, came here after the war. My wife was Filipina, and as well as one of my daughters is Filipina. And these people are referred to by some in a not very friendly way as outsiders, settlers, colonizers. So yeah, I've been here my entire life. I've been here 60 years, but I'm very concerned about what would happen. In Africa, as the various nations were decolonized, unfortunately, some of the elites got their education in Western universities, and they got indoctrinated with these Marxist ideas. And they brought a lot of these socialist Marxist ideas back to their countries, one of them being Zimbabwe. And, you can fill in the gaps, Bob. Your knowledge of history is much better than mine. But the slaughters that happened after decolonization in Africa. And I'm not saying there's going to be slaughters here, but I'm saying the potential for very negative things happening in the way of nationalization of businesses, appropriation of property owned by outsiders and settlers. That's a very real thing. And we see the radicalism that has exploded on the Western campuses in America. And that is out here. And, so it concerns me a great deal. And it should concern everyone, Chamorro or not Chamorro, as to what the potential is if our protections under the Constitution, I'm talking about the Bill of Rights, are stripped away. And the constraints of the local government, as well as the national government, but I'm concerned about it, the federal laws that constrain the local government are stripped away. And suddenly our politicians have this unlimited power.
I know what you mean, Carl. I got I'm heading for the home stretch, Carl, but I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to chime in and add my 2 bits for whatever it's worth. I agree. There's very much cause for concern, especially seeing what's going on in the States and this radicalism that's just like a fever sweeping across America. Anyway, Bob, I'll let that be all for now.
Thank you. So here we are heading into the home stretch.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's take a stroll. Let's gallivant. Let's go cruising.
We all have different ways to describe how we get up and go in our cars. But whatever you may call it, you can do more of it when you save 6% off your fuel purchases at any Shell station when you use your eligible Bank of Guam Visa and MasterCard credit cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
So the home stretch, here we are, Churchill Downs, call to the post. And once again, when we run the Kentucky Derby here on Tall Tales, we give the rose wreath to the fastest horse, not the most polite horse. Typical Tall Tales. So I've got about, let's see, 5 more minutes to go for the end of another exciting episode of Tall Tales. And once again, I'm peeking at my Facebook comments here. Jesse Limtiaco says, Palau is an independent nation, and they don't have their own currency. Well, then, Jesse, how independent are they if they have to still use the colonizers' money? And isn't that kind of the point? That the old saying is, size does matter. And my rap from time to time has been that our biggest problems here is how many of us there are and where we are. Not who we are, but how many. There are only 160,000 of us. So you could kind of look at it like this. You know, we started out with 13 colonies on the shore of an untamed continent. 13 people who primarily came from the British Isles, other parts of Europe, and started a country there on a very novel idea, and that was that individual rights were greater than the rights of the country, of the government, and that people could govern themselves without the aid of aristocracy or kings or stuff like that. And the idea was that that country would move to the west. That was pretty much understood from the very beginning. And a constitution was adopted. There's a provision for new states as to how a new state would become a state in the United States. And after the 13 colonies, a lot of states were added, obviously, because we're up to 50 right now. But there was something generally you could say about all the new states. They all had a pretty significant area. And they all had a population about equal to the smallest of the states currently in the Union. And they all arguably could be somewhat self-sufficient, that if they were admitted to the Union, they wouldn't be required that they'd be supported by the other states. So it was a big jump to go from Missouri to California because there was nothing but wilderness between Missouri and California. They weren't really connected at all, but we did. It's another big jump to go to Alaska because you can't get to Alaska. You can't drive to Alaska from any other part of the United States by car. You got to go through a foreign country to get to Alaska. In Hawaii, you got to sail across the ocean for 2,400 miles to get to Hawaii. But Alaska, Hawaii, California all met those requirements. So when it came time to determine who was going to be a state, that was the tests that were applied. But when Uncle Sam saw Guam, this may be what happened. You're too far away, you're not connected, and there aren't enough people there to be a state. But we'll bring you in anyhow. We'll let you go, and we'll figure out a way to bring you in, even though you don't have enough people. And you will be, you'll benefit from our Constitution, our rule of law, and a lot of other things. That's where we are today. So, Jesse Limtiaco, keep trying, and I will gladly welcome your comments, yours and the Smart Money, and we'll see where they go. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.